G'day, and welcome to the Last Lines of Noobs Men. We have a special guest over here. Introduce yourself, my good sir.
Hello, everyone. If you have not seen my face before or my postings on the Great British Hobbit League Facebook page, yes, I'm Eliott. I'm one of 9 members of the Golems Gamers, which is a team in the GBHL, but we also have a YouTube channel where we have a podcast where we cover the UK tournament scene and everything to do with that in a lot of detail, and we post bat reps and all sorts of things. So I've been spamming it on the internet for the last year or so. So I hope maybe some of you have seen it.
it's all good stuff.
It's all
good
out
stuff.
There. So
and everything for the viewers, if they want to go and check out Eliott and his crew stuff, it'll all be straight down below.
Yeah, baby. Come on.
But yeah, we're here to some might say amend the ties between
the relations.
Between Australia and England, specifically Australia and GBHL.
Yeah, we've met on open waters, as you can see by Sean's background. We're
in the Ha Long Bay in Vietnam,
so,
and we're just hanging out.
Yeah,
but no, we're going to have a bit of a chat about, in a way, the differences between, I guess, the culture of the game. So mainly related to tournaments and how they play and are structured.
Yeah.
And this all came about because of the Clash video that I released recently. Who knows when, but I released at some point.
Yeah, because I think kind of the place to start, because I think it'd be a education piece for me as well, because I'm not too familiar with how the Australian League works. I think maybe, and obviously for some of your viewers, maybe they're not too in tune with how the GBHL works. So I thought maybe to start, because there may be people watching that don't know either side, we can briefly kind of recap how each of our leagues sort of work. So I guess I'll go first. So for the GBHL, so if you're not aware kind of how it is run, so we have 3 different brackets for events, which are called 80s, 90s and 100s. So 100s being the most competitive events that we run, so they attract all the most competitive players, as there's the most amount of points on offer, 100 points for the winner, where the least competitive events are GBHL 80s, with 80 points being the maximum that's on offer. So none of the competitive players in our league attend 80s really at all. And then 90s is something in the middle. They're a fairly new thing, but the aim there was to attract kind of players from 80s that want to start being more competitive, but maybe aren't ready to jump up to 100s yet. So when you attend one of these events, depending on where you place, you get a score, and then it's your top 6 scores, which has changed for this year, but that are added up at the end of the year, and that's where you are ranked nationally. There are also team rankings. So we have a team in the GBHL. We came 3rd last year, which was pretty good in the first year. But that's kind of the structure of the league. So if you want to be a competitive player, say you attend 90s or 100s, try and get good scores and see where you place in the league.
That's fair.
That's how it works.
Now, this is, you mentioned this is a national thing. This is for the entirety of England, and I believe Scotland and Ireland partake as well.
England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. There is a Irish Hobbit League as well, which is for the rest of Ireland. But yeah, Northern Ireland as well.
Oh, awesome. It sounds quite similar to the Queensland League. And now this is where we differ a fair bit between over your side of the world and here. Because of how big the country is, we don't have a national league.
Gotcha.
There were attempts for it a couple of years ago.
Okay.
But it just didn't work. And there's always little talks about how we can introduce that back in, but it just, with how big it is and how long it takes to get from Brisbane to Sydney, for example, is a 10-hour drive.
Yeah.
Melbourne to Sydney, again, 10-hour drive. To get over to Perth, I don't even know how long that takes. It probably takes like a day or two. Who knows?
Yeah.
And then, so the only other option if you don't want to drive all that is to fly, which is quite expensive. So we don't have a national league itself.
Yeah.
What we do have is each individual state has their own tournament scene, is the best way to put it. Now, I'm not sure about Western Australia. They're so far over the other side of the country that
They're over there.
Who knows what the fuck they're doing? They're hanging out. I know they definitely have tournaments. Whether they have a league structure, I'm not sure. Victoria, which is where I'm currently based, they don't have a league structure either, but they have regular tournaments.
Okay.
There was a bit of pushback, from my understanding, from the old guard within Victoria about having an official league structure. So it's
interesting.
Almost like a reputation-based thing. If you go to events and you're winning events, people just know that you're of the upper echelon of players.
I see. Although there might not be a specific sort of like points level awarded for X tournament or something.
Yeah, exactly. So you go to your tournaments. It could be a 500-point tournament, tournament, could be an 800-point tournament or whatever, and it's just about winning it. You do your best as you can to win it. There's nothing else there.
Gotcha.
New South Wales, I think they're very similar, but from my understanding, they actually hold a few less tournaments, but they've got the two most prestigious tournaments in Australia. The ones that everyone travels to. So you've got Masters, and you've got the one that recently just happened with it, which is Clash. Now, Masters for the longest amount of time was the number one that had the most players attending, getting between 70-ish players. Clash has come along, and we've hit it got to 88 initially and dropped down to 81 by the end of the tournament. I believe that's how that worked out. So it turned out to be the biggest tournament held in Australia. But once again, a lot of it has to do with traveling as to why our tournaments are not as big as, say, over in the UK. But then we'll go and look at Queensland, which is that's my home state. That's where I'm from. That's the I was running the league for about a year last year. And we have a proper league structure there, and quite similar to GBHL. It was initially started from Lockie from Zorpazorp. He was the initial league coordinator there. But then once he moved to New Zealand, that got palmed off and whatnot. So we have three levels of tournaments. We've got 80 points, which is the lower side of things. So that tends to be, it could be doubles events or no alliance matrix, kind of like memia kind of stuff. We then move up to the 100-point events, which is our stock standard, essentially follow the GW rules, maybe put a little bit of flair onto it with your own,
rules or
couple of things here and there, nothing too crazy. And then you've got the 120s, which is the big tentpole event. So the Queensland GT, the one that I run, that is one of the 120-point events.
120-point. Okay.
Yeah. So there's some similarities there between Queensland and the UK. But as a whole, in terms of national identity and whatnot, we're all very different. Okay.
Well, I guess that would sort of lead me into kind of maybe one of the first points to touch on then. So, because obviously, like you just mentioned, geographically, there's obviously challenges with having sort of a national league in that sense. So, does that lead, do you think, then to sort of more localized metas and best practices of playing the game and lists that are strong and prevalent and things in each region? Because obviously things are so split in that sense.
Oh, mate, absolutely. So put Queensland, for example, and that's the one that I'm going to probably talk about the most because that's the one I know the best.
Yeah.
Although I am in Victoria, I'm still trying to figure out what it is these days. Queensland is there's not really a meta up in Queensland.
Okay.
People just take whatever they feel like taking. It might not be a quote unquote competitive list.
Mm-hmm.
Some people do take those competitive lists and what people over in, say, the UK and Europe and whatnot would consider meta.
Yeah.
But here it's, someone will just wake up in the morning and go, I'm going to run Lake Town. Myself, for example, basically to all tournaments, whether they're Queensland events or New South Wales events or Victorian, I don't figure out what I'm taking until the day of list submission. And then I'll just write something up and I'll palm it off and go, all right, that's what I'm running. Let's see what I can do.
Yeah. Lots of our top players over here are like that as well. So
there's something about going in blind to events that I really like. But so Queensland is a bit more themey. People tend to lean towards a theme of their list.
Yeah.
Victoria is probably the state that everyone looks at and goes, that's the competitive state. That's where the competitive players are. Friendly games can be quite hectic as well. But yeah, if you come to a tournament in Victoria, that's where you kind of go, this is going to be a little bit rough. New South Wales, without trying to be too rude to them, it just kind of feels like the state of tryhards. But I do love them. There's some great people over there in New South Wales. And
they've been watching the Noobs podcast then, potentially.
Yeah. So
because I think that's interesting because over here kind of there's usually just one meta. I mean, there is really, because at every one of our big events, so the GBHL 100s, not everyone, but almost everyone, it's the same pool of players that's going, and you're seeing the same faces every time. There's maybe a couple of them that aren't there, but like on the whole, we'll have the Golems gamers lot there. We'll have between 5 and 9 players at every GBHL 100 almost, and then we've got the 7th City Crusaders who came second in the league last year. They'll have between 4 and 8 or 9 players at every event as well, and then the Guardians of Distant Lands as well that won the league last year. They'll have as well between 4 and maybe 6 players, because they've got some from Northern Ireland and things as well, which don't always make it. So you've got about 20 players almost every GBHL 100 from the top 3 teams that are at every single 100. So you know their lists, their strengths, like you play them all the time and things. So there's kind of just one meta that all those people fit into. So that's obviously completely different to kind of how it is in Australia. And I mean, maybe just because obviously you have lots of Australian viewers, just to kind of, I guess, maybe recap sort of about the GBHL and kind of what our meta is and what it has been in recent memory. So last year, our meta was heavily dominated by the Witch King Suladan cheese.
We've heard a lot about that over here.
Well documented online. So obviously that was just super, super strong. I went on the Into the West podcast at the start of this year, and they did a recap kind of on the lists and everything that won in 2023 as a whole. And Mordor, Serpent Horde were the top 2 factions because the Witch King Suladan alliance was just so strong and prevalent. After that, kind of lists like Assault on Helm's Deep before it was nerfed, and Dragon Emperor were just really, really common and finished really, really well at our top events. Even after Assault was nerfed, pure Isengard just with crossbow spam and a ballista became really, really good. Some of our top players taking it and winning 100-point events and doing super well.
And so the next question that just popped up for me there is, a lot of these top players, are they taking the same list to each event that is being played?
It kind of depends. So I mean, in contrast to what you said a minute ago, where you'll wake up on the day and see kind of what you want to take, lots of our top players over here will have a staple maybe 1, 2, or 3 lists that they may sort of rotate. But yeah, usually kind of say a particular top player might be taking Isengard for a while, and he'll take Isengard quite a lot to lots of 100-pointers. So usually, I mean, we do get some who kind of rotate a bit more than others, but usually, oh, this player is going to be taking either this or that, most likely at this points level, or, at 800, oh yeah, he'll take that. So part of the sort of skill level, I guess, over here at the top end is to kind of read the points level and the players that are going and knowing what they'll be taking and maybe trying to take things to counter that. So Blinding Light, for example, in recent months and everything has become really, really prevalent and a huge factor at lots of our events, because if you run into a big, Isengard crossbow list or dwarves or whatever it is, and you're a D6 army, well, by the time you get there, you've lost a lot of black numbs or whatever the case may be. So there were other lists that did well and things like Arnor, Loth, kind of soupy lists with like Erebor Reclaimed or Guahir and things like that. So there were other lists that kind of did well, but mostly, like I said, the shooting, and then also magic is a huge factor in our scene. And I guess I wanted to ask, is that as much of a factor at your big 120-point events?
Well, see, touching slightly back a little bit there on players showing up with the same list. You never know what someone's going to take to an event. So you could look at the top end players and you go, oh, 800 points, what are they going to take? I have no idea. Like everyone is most of the time anyway, a lot of people here are changing their list so frequently. It's just, Liam, for example, I don't think he's ever run the same list to a tournament back to back.
Really?
I've done it once or twice. I can't even remember the last time I've run an army to a tournament back to back. Now I ran bears for a fair while, and so they showed up to it a few of my tournaments previous years. Gondor was the same, but for the most part, each tournament I feel like I'm taking something different.
Something else.
A lot of players tend to be doing the same. Just once moving back forward, you're talking about shooting in Magic.
Yes.
Being prevalent. That is quite a big thing here. We do love our shooting. Up in Queensland, there's not as much Magic floating around as there is in, say, New South Wales, Victoria. But when it comes to shooting, most players are taking 33% bows, or they're taking their throwing weapons. If you look at Clash and all those lists, I think that there was shooting in every single one of those lists. The Bears that finished 5th was the only list that had like 2 bows. The rest, for the most part, maxed out as much as they could. There was Angmar in there with throwing spears on wargs. There was Theodred's guards with a bunch of throwing spears. There was my list, which was just a fuck ton of shooting.
Yes.
And now this is where I wanted to dive into the whole shooting thing. What we've seen from over in the UK, from our side of the world here, is the difference between terrain. Now, we've seen a lot of your events over there, and we look at that and go, of course the meta's going to be shooting, because there's fuck all terrain anyway. Whereas we have fairly dense tables for the most part anyway. There are obviously some events where there's a little bit less. Sometimes at events, there'll be a table with a really, really dense board, and there'll be a table with not so much. But for the most part, we have a sizable amount of terrain, a lot of line of sight blocking, a lot of buildings that just flat out, you hide behind it and you're good to go. A lot of the shooting you're having to take in the ways here. So how's that going over there? Is because
It's been a topic of conversation on the podcast. We have a nominated terrain inspector, Adam Sirens, who is from Spain. So he's very sort of clued in on the Spanish scene, and then he's been living and playing in the UK scene for a long time, and he has had some gripes previously on the podcast and things with British terrain. And yes, it was a point I was going to mention because he actually said, make sure you ask about the terrain because he is the terrain man. So yes, it has been said that boards over here can be more open, and and like you say, that can lead to shooting armies being really, really good. Now, there are some TOs. There's a couple that would spring to mind immediately that have really great boards and put in a lot of effort in the terrain and everything. Really, really good. But I've been to a lot of events over the last couple of years, and there have definitely been many, many boards I've played on that are just almost completely open. Now, sort of, I've heard from other TOs and things that, oh, you know, you want variety and stuff, which of course you want some that are more open than others. But I mean, if I turn up to a board and it's a Dead Marshes board, for example, and it is literally just marsh, little flat, you know, terrain bits with a tree, like one tree on the whole board or something, you know, you get lots of boards that might be like that, or maybe have one building somewhere. And if you're playing a particular scenario, you know, that could just be so, you know, detrimental depending on the scenario and the matchup. So
see, for example, in Clash, my round 2 game, the board, there was a fair bit of, you know, line of sight blocking stuff and whatnot, but it was, for the most part, very heavily designed towards my army. My army loved that type. We were playing Storm the Camp. There were lots of just shooting alleys with no line of sight blocking or anything in between or within those shooting alleys. And so my opponent just came down the board and I just gunned them down. I personally hate seeing tables like that. It's definitely interesting.
Yeah, it's part of what, obviously, if you're the shooting player, right? Like, you roll the dice when you go to an event because, oh, in this particular matchup and scenario, you know, I need it to be open so that I my shooting. Oh, but it's not. But I guess the upside potentially between using said list, say Isengard, crossbow spam or something over here compared to Australia, is that it may be more likely that you have more boards that you can maximize that on compared to Australia. So it allows certain lists to excel. It's why Blinding Light has become such an important thing, because especially when Assault, for example, was just so big before the nerf. Ash on our team, who came 3rd in the league overall last year, he kept on playing Jay, who is on our team as well, who took Assault for the longest time, and every time he would keep on running into Jay and losing because, you know, his Witch King Settle Down list was super strong, but as soon as he played Assault, he would just lose. So players would then start taking the Shadow Lord and things like that to counter. So that's kind of how it goes with the terrain.
No, that's fair. It's just there's one board in particular that always sticks out in my mind, and it popped up a couple of years ago, and it was this incredible arable backdrop, which wasn't part of the playing field or anything, but this incredible arable backdrop, and then there was 5 rocks about the size of a bloody G-dub thing, just put down as if it was like they were objectives for domination. And
it's a themey board, man.
And I went, my God, as someone who really loves shooting, like I'm a big fan of shooting,
you would,
I would have frothed it. I'm putting my Dunedain down and I'm giggling all the
You're having a good time. You're having a good time. Yeah. Another little gripe as well. I'm not sure how it maybe is in Australia. This is a little bit off topic, but do you ever get sometimes on boards where we have the mats usually, right? Like the mouse pad mats, but do you ever get it where it's like the felt sort of like cloths that go like over the top of the table that always like move? Do you get those ever?
No. So for the most part, what we use... so for the most part, what we've got is your neoprene mats, similar to mouse pads and whatnot. There's the the G-Dub boards, the
yes,
the
those,
2x2s that connect into
yes, yeah,
and then just good old MDF boards that people have painted up. So that's
we
what
we rarely get anything that isn't a just regular table with either a mouse pad or a felt cloth on top. We never get like an MDF board or those G-Dub plates or whatever. But yeah, if you get the felt cloths over the top, they just move all the time, and your models, like when you try to put them on, it just moves. So it's a personal guide.
See, I personally quite dislike the G-Dub plastic boards that they build.
Yeah,
you put models on the hills and they just they're sliding everywhere. Yeah, so that can be a tad rough.
So yeah, in terms of magic, then. So
yeah, magic. Of course,
it's a big. I mean, so Witch King, arguably the best model in the game, potentially. Although he wasn't on your S tier. He wasn't.
No, he did make it to S tier though.
He did the S tier of S tier. So it's a pretty good slate. And I mean, so the main thing that we cover on the podcast, I think about half of the episodes that we've done are preview episodes for GBHL 100s, where we look at the lists that are going and the stats for the event and things. And I mean, the amount of
magic
previews we've done where the Witch King has been the most taken leader. Sometimes there's 12, 13 Witch Kings being taken to an event. And that's happened multiple times. I mean, almost every event is the same in that aspect. So,
and I think I should ask, on average, how many players do you reckon you're getting at each event? Because from my understanding, it is a lot more than what we get over here. We do have a smaller player pool, but by no means does that mean we are less committed.
It's no, of course. It's so our GBHL 100s this year had a change in the league where now they have to offer a minimum of 64 tickets. Now that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that those events have to have 64 players turn up to run. It's just they have to have the capacity to offer 64 tickets. So one of them, for example, this weekend is only going to be like 35 players. And there was a couple of those last year as well, which were on the 35-40 mark. But yeah, lots of them are hitting around the 64 and even.
Yeah, that's big. Yeah. But even then, like hitting those 30 to 60 and still getting 12 plus Witch Kings. That's insane. That's huge.
It's so much. And especially at these 100s, kind of, you've got lots of people that take Mordor very regularly and all, so magic is just everywhere. Angmar is still very prevalent. So, but is it something that maybe doesn't impact the metas in Australia as much?
There's definitely magic. We definitely have magic floating around. Do we have as much as 12 Witch Kings showing up to events? Absolutely not.
No.
So up in Queensland again, and once again, I'll preface this again, most of my knowledge is Queensland based.
Sure.
Up there, we're hitting between 25 and 30 players per tournament on average. The Queensland GT, for example, that is capping out at 50 players this year. So that kind of shows a little bit of what I mean by that smaller player pool. But you'll see magic show up. There's always going to be at least one Witch King. Like you can kind of count that as happening, but
obviously that's a big difference. If you're going to bet
on 12.
No.
The last time I can remember going to tournaments and going, oh shit, there's a lot of the same list, and oh, maybe there is a meta up here. Is when Riders of Theoden was fucking everywhere.
Busted. Right.
So pre-gambling nerf, Riders of Theoden was everywhere. You'd go up to a 25-player event and you'd see 5, 6, 7 Riders of Theoden lists.
Yeah.
Since that nerf, there's no list that springs to mind that I go, you're always going to see multiple of this. You'll always see the Bears. You'll always see a Witch King. Interestingly, this is real interesting that came to my attention the other day. was there's a lot of dwarves being played up in Queensland at the moment.
Right.
And not just Iron Hills, but Khazad-dûm.
Khazad-dûm is having a recent resurgence over here in the UK as well.
Yeah, it's well interesting.
It's a faction I've always been quite interested in as well. But I think, part of that to kind of touch on the terrain piece again. I mean, so I think when you have boards that are more dense, not only does it help the shooting, but more elite armies as well that want to play in chokeholds and anchor around terrain and all that sort of thing, they're able to succeed more if there are more dense boards, where if it's more open, over here, higher model count armies are more prevalent, more horde armies, because they've got the room to wrap and everything on those more elite armies with lower model count. So I think that's probably quite a key difference that will allow different types of lists to succeed in Australia compared to UK.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's another thing is even though we have a lot of dense boards, and for the most part our boards are fairly dense, you'll still see horde lists. People almost don't put too much consideration into what the table's going to be like. What's the potential meta? Alex has won Clash. He's running Harad, or he won it with Harad. What can I do to potentially stop that if I'm running into him? Because odds are he'll be at the top of the table again.
Yeah,
you don't really think about that.
Really.
It is very much, what do I want to run? I'll put it on a table and hope to God that my opponent and
favorable
my
matchup.
table and just to hope that everything's a favorable matchup. So for example, Clash, initially I was going to take Bears. It was a 600-point tournament, and I went, I've got to drive 9 hours. I don't really want to put stuff in a big case and lug that around. I've got my Bears in a case that's about yay big.
Little one,
Little handbag.
Love it.
They always live in that. So as I'm leaving the house, I could just pick that up and off I go. And
Bears.
so that's why I was going to take Bears. It was like, it's easy, whatever. It wasn't until Liam sent me a triple bolt thrower list just for shits and giggles that I went, could do that, but with a trebuchet.
What about triple trebuchet, huh? James Goebel, shout out.
God,
love trebuchet.
Triple trebuchet.
Come on,
that's a bit of fun. But yeah, so it was, and that was like a day before this submission that I went, all right, bugger it, I guess this is what I'm doing.
That is just such a big difference. I mean, to where your top player pool doesn't take the same list very often, and when you turn up to an event, you're not sure what most of the top players are going to be taking because it changes so frequently. Where obviously over here that does still happen, but I mean, Ash, for example, he came third in the league last year. He hasn't run a list that isn't Witch King Soladan for a very long time, unless it's like really low points and it just doesn't work. But if it works, which at most points levels he does, that's what he's taking. Jay has taken Assault or Isengard for the longest time. He takes some other things here and there, but on the most part,
and so, like we've all got like our mains. Like we've all got that. I would probably consider Gondor to be my main faction that I play.
Old Faithful.
Old Faithful. They sit in my cupboard. I never use them for friendlies. If I'm going to a tournament, I don't know what to run, I'll whip out Gondor.
You'll just go and grab it.
I go like, I know them back to front. I know how they play. Like, I'll whip them out.
Yeah.
But for the most part, even then, I'm not doing that.
No.
Yeah. I did run Rivendell with Gildor.
Yes, I saw a little bit.
The old Leopard Prince. So that was they were great.
Yeah, good fun.
I'm just trying to think. In terms of people that consistently bring the same army to events, it tends to be the newer players because they've just gotten into the hobby. They've got one army.
Yeah. Makes
and
sense.
they're trying to learn. And a lot of our tournaments here, even like the big 120 events in Queensland, very beginner friendly.
Yeah.
You've got your competitive players and you've got your beginner players, and it caters everyone. It's and that's exactly like, we're here to grow the hobby. We want people to enjoy. We want all that. But Alex, who won Clash in New South Wales recently, he's the only player that I can think of at the moment who has been practicing with Harad, taking Harad to events and just really knuckling down and going, this is the army I'm figuring out. And you think of Alex, you think of Harad at the moment. But he did that with the full intention of going over to England for Articon, this coming Articon. So he's like, I want to know this down pat. I need to.
Yeah, he wants it.
Which is why he's doing it. Whereas, again, everyone else is kind of just, we'll take what we take and we'll see what happens.
But that's it's a much more common thing over here for people to kind of stick in a lane or two and kind of excel at that. You maybe have something that you switch to when it's a lower point event, and then higher point event, you kind of go back to your old faithful or whatever it is. I guess to close out the Magic piece then, so I think something that kind of, as say at every GBHL 100 there's a chance there's going to be over 10 Witch Kings roughly. It just leads to a much different meta, because taking, say, someone like Bolg, for example, as I've seen Bolg on your channel and other Australian kind of avenues and things, is held in quite high regard. Where over here, as Magic is so prevalent, if you run Bolg, I mean, the chances are he's not going to do much. So I actually really like Bolg as a profile. Like, he's super good. But if in 4 out of 6 games, I mean, he's sat there not really doing anything, you're probably not going to do well at that event. So the fact that Magic is so strong, it leads to Magic resistant armies like Loth or Numenor, and heroes as well being so strong. And kind of, if you're not taking those things, you better have some cheap heroes that you're not too worried if the Magic is targeting them. Like Arnor or something, for example. If you play against lots of Magic, you're not too worried about that.
This is where I guess I can understand people's love for Glorfindel overseas.
Yes.
Fuck, he's trash. But
we'd be here for another 3 hours. Sure.
It's another chat. But so like, that's if 12 Witch Kings are showing up, you kind of go.
Exactly.
Good point. Like, I
and when that happens so consistently as well, it's like, you've got to plan for that at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. But man, I'm just having fucking brain farts. It's like I'm the one who's awake at 6 a.m. in the morning.
That's
just
me, baby.
Not being able to think. No, I've lost it. I've completely lost it.
I've got something. So I guess the main sort of point, I guess we've been kind of around the edges and everything, sort of like discussing the kind of main differences between the game itself and how it's played over here and over there in Australia. But I think it all boils down to all those other things, to kind of one key thing, which is just the approach to the game, or the culture surrounding the game.
Absolutely.
And that's just very different. That's just very different over here compared to how it is in Australia. I think it's much more over here competitively focused. It's a very sort of meta chasing, cheesy, sort of culture, at least at, say, GBHL 100s. At say 80s, for example, there is a much more thematic community and just of wargamers that just want to play SBG and love it, and they love the theme and all that sort of stuff. And obviously that is, there are tons and tons of 80s that are ran all over the country. So there is a big community of players that aren't very competitive and who would never take really meta lists and things. But there is a very big community as well of not only players who go to GBHL 100s, but players at 90s and things as well that want to be really competitive and take the best lists and perform well and win events and try podium and everything at 90s and 100s. So it kind of
that's the thing over here that I've really noticed compared to what you're touching on there is like, yes, we are quite competitively focused, or the players that are competitively minded, like myself, I consider myself a competitive player. In a way, we're looking to challenge ourselves every tournament by taking something we haven't used much, or something completely brand new, as opposed to completely dialing in and going. Like, there's nothing I love more than going to a tournament with a list that people consider to be and doing well with it. Dale, for example. I went to town. I went to town with Dale pre the Knights of Dale, which made Dale crazy good. Before that, people were like, nah, Dale's meh, Dale's whatever. But I was like, no, I'm gonna take him to a couple of events and see where we go. And I think a lot of our players, even our competitive ones, Kylie, for example. Now I'm nowhere near as good as Kylie. Kylie is a god to all of us here, essentially.
I actually met her on the world tour.
On her adventure, yeah.
He came to a GBHL 100. He did podium match. He came third. But there were two Golems gamers who came first and second. So
hell yeah, that's what you want to hear. But like, even she will, for the most part, she'll take a themey. From what I've seen anyway, she'll take a themey list that has a competitive mindset to it. And that's where a lot of us do that. That's how we approach the game. Ultimately, it is a narratively driven game. It's from, Lord of the Rings. It's got all the stories of Tolkien's works and whatnot. And we kind of try and meld that into our gameplay.
It seems like there's a lot more kind of your player pool, like you said, kind of may lean into taking more obscure lists and things, because it seems like the culture over there is more not about just trying to take the best thing and read the meta and trying to kind of perform off of that. It's more, what can I think of? What is an interesting, cool list that I want to take that might not be the best list at a particular points level, but if I win with this, well, that shows something, And
absolutely. And that's what a lot of people are trying to get with. So, for example, Dunedain. I frothed the Dunedain. Beside the fact that I got my ass walloped from it and I looked like an absolute scrub on Conquest Creations video playing Dunedain. God, I look back at that game and I am ashamed of myself. But I won the Queensland League. I won that last year, was it? Yeah, last year. Essentially off the back of the Dunedain.
Right.
I did main Dunedain for, a lot of those events. But still, even then, I was still changing lists through each event. I say I mained the Dunedain, I probably took them to 4 events.
Right.
A total of 12 events over the year. Kind of thing.
It was in there. It was part of the success.
Absolutely. But a lot of people look at them and go, they're not a competitive army.
Top tier.
They're not a top tier army, and people are 100% correct. They're pretty not.
That's some shortcomings.
Absolutely, they do. But if you can get the most out of them, which 90% of the time I can. They're a phenomenal force, and I will die on a hill saying that they will win tournaments because I know they can. I've done it before.
So, and it's where kind of the player skill and kind of it's not that isn't something that is obviously appreciated and everything over here, because obviously we have some very, very skilled players.
Absolutely.
The league over here is huge, but it's more people want to. It's more of a meta game. It seems is the main contrast. And I mean, is the reason that that's not the case in Australia, is that just a conscious decision kind of from the community or as a whole, or kind of the top players lead that charge and then everyone else kind of, how is that,
it's a little bit of both, to be fair. I think just the way the game was brought up back in the day, people lent towards that narrative, themey, way of playing, and then that's just built and built and built and gone, and then so like, I remember having a chat with someone. I say a chat, maybe a bit of a heated debate with someone online when they were complaining about Suladan and how Suladan needs to be nerfed, and I was like,
is this on the GBHL Facebook page by any chance?
Yeah, using my fake burner account because I've been banned from GBHL.
Yes,
shout out to Big John Smith.
Hey, let's go.
So I was having this chat with someone, and they were like, "Oh, Suladan needs to be nerfed. He's too good. He keeps getting allied into stuff. He keeps showing up to events." I was like, just don't take him then. Take something else. Be that change that you want to see in the community. Oh no, but I need to win games. All right, there's your problem. You and however many other people have this mindset of no, I need to win games for myself. I need to win games for my teams. So I'm going to take these medalists. Whereas the culture over here is, I want to win games for myself. I want to win games for my team, but I want to do it in such a way that is themey, or people consider the list to not be very good. And so
and it's about trying to pilot the list to a win, maybe rather than having the list
pilot
you to the win. And obviously I do see the merit, and I think it's a much more organic sort of way to approach the game, because it's, what do I fancy taking? What do I think is decent? I can have fun with, I can try this new thing or that. I think it keeps things fresher as well. Obviously, we're at a point over here where things are very kind of stagnant at the moment with no new releases and things. Obviously, hopefully there's more to come in this year, 2024, but things have been the same for the last kind of little while, where in Australia, I'm sure, because you're going to an event and you don't know what's going to be there, every event is quite unique in a sense, where I think the way that we engineer that over here is by changing the events to try and make things more unique. So with special rules and changes to the rules of scenarios and things like that, to try and create newish kind of little metas for a particular tournament. So that's a way that lots of TOs have been trying to spice things up really in the game for us.
No, and that's completely fair and very, very commendable. Because it does seem like, once again, like we're feeling that stagnation with no new releases, but it seems like we're not feeling it as hard as say you guys are, because each event is very different. Even when it comes to like just list building, for example, you rule of cool is the big thing.
Is
and
key.
I believe that's what this game should run on, is rule of cool. You go, cool, I've got a tournament in September. That's the only tournament that I can go to this year. What list am I going to take that I'm going to have the most amount of fun with?
You're going to be excited for in the run up, and
and I'm a huge advocate in this game of, you will be most successful when you're having fun. I've ran lists that I've gone, this is a competitive list, I've built it to be competitive, I've built it so there's no downfalls. But there's one major downfall, and is that I was bored out of my brains playing it. And because I was bored and not interested in it, I failed.
You're not locked in on the game.
I'm not locked in. Whereas Dale, for whatever reason, in 2019, I fell in love with Dale. And I went, I'm going to run this. And I took it to an event. I didn't really consider myself a competitive player back then. I just enjoyed going to events and socializing.
Yeah.
And I came 11th, I think it was, out of 50-ish players.
Yep.
I was like, that's fucking amazing. Let's go.
Good time.
And then eventually I ended up winning a couple of... I've won one tournament with Dale and podium a couple of times with him. Okay. And that's solely off the back of just, this is what I enjoy. And because I enjoyed playing it, I'm doing better with it. And that's how I see all of my lists, essentially.
Yeah. Where I guess a contrast from that, and not to say that I didn't have fun with these lists, but I mean, so last year I tracked every single game that I played. I played like 160 games last year or something like that over all the tournaments I went to. Yeah. And my 2 most used armies were the Dragon Emperor Legion and Witch King Soledad.
Yeah.
So it isn't that I took those lists. I mean, I did take those lists because I wanted to do well, which ultimately I didn't do that well. But
hey, look, doing well is fun. So
yes. So and I think that is an approach for lots of people, and I enjoy the game enough to still enjoy it almost regardless of what I'm using. And if I can use something that I think is fun, but also really, really strong, that's what I'm going to do. And it seems that just that is the culture over here. And, that is the most common approach for people towards the game.
And there is a fine line between what is... or there's a fine line between making that list that is fun but also competitive. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to show up to an event with ruffians and win an event with ruffians.
Yeah.
I will struggle. Even if I dial in with them, I will struggle.
Yeah.
It is a list that I really want to run one day, though. Mm-hmm. Ruffians look like a shit ton of fun.
Yeah.
But once again, I enjoy writing lists that are competitive but also fun, and that's the fine line. I think the major difference between the more competitive players here and the more casual gamers is that line between fun and competitive. There are a few outliers, obviously, that will dive in with what is considered a competitive list, but it's ultimately all about fun. And like, even just having this chat with you, there's a lot more similarities between our groups than I first thought.
On the surface, and obviously, I think because I didn't really know anything about the Australian scene and things. Obviously, we see bits online, there are Facebook groups and everything, but I mean, there may be lots of Australians that have kind of heard of the GBHL and Witch King Soledad, but that's all they really know. So, I guess there was one final piece from me that I saw in your Clash video, and it's a personal bugbear of mine, I must say. It's about soft scores.
Yes. I was kind of looking forward to this one.
Yes. So, personally, I am of the group, the camp, whatever you want to call it, and I think lots of players are over here as well, of that. The game is one thing, and
the hobby is separate.
Everything else, not only the hobby, but also kind of sportsmanship, and all that sort of stuff. Everything that isn't the TPs, VP diff, and everything that isn't to do with the gaming is separate from that, and that the two shouldn't, I feel, impact the other. Say when you're playing football or whatever it is, the score at the end is who wins, right? And obviously there are other things that come into play. There's the narrative of a game and all kinds of things, but like ultimately, at a tournament, it is about the gameplay, and the scores at the end should only be determined, I feel, by the gaming results. I have been to a couple tournaments over here which aren't like that. They're definitely not GBHL 100s, but I've been to a couple 90s before where, say, most sporting is a vote which is counted towards your TPs or however it worked. I actually voted for someone who ended up winning the event. Had I not voted for him, I would have won the event. So,
that hurts.
And obviously with yourself, you would have moved up a couple places in Clash if you had a display board. Now that's something I've never seen over here before, but having TPs or whatever it is related to bringing along something that isn't to do with the actual gameplay is very, very different. And it seems maybe is quite common in Australia for soft scores to contribute.
Yeah, so the best way to put it is, for the most part, 90% of tournaments, you'll have a couple of soft scores. And so that'll be the likes of, is your army got 3 colors on it? You know, the classic G-dub stuff. Does your army have 3 colors on it? Are they based? And have you gone above and beyond? Now, above and beyond could be display board. Above and beyond could be highlighting. It could be freehand. So for the most part, it's those 3 things.
Right.
Or actually 4. The 4th one is list submission. Have you submitted your list on time?
Yes. Right.
That
as well. Yeah.
Those are 4 things that do, for the most part, affect your tournament results. Now, normally they don't affect it too much. It's a little outliers here and there, and it's, once again, it's that whole idea of the theme and the hobby, and that's what we ultimately truly love over here. Is the spectacle of it all. If you want to win a tournament, you've got to be a nice guy. Like, no.
Do you though? Do you have to be a nice guy?
Absolutely. I'm going to sound like a pom over here when it comes to cricket. Spirit of the game, massive. There's I don't want to dive into it too much, but there is one player that is bit touch and go in the scene of things.
Right.
And yeah, when you see people like that do well, because of, you know, how much of a they can be, you just, no one's there for it. He's like, we don't like this. But so, like, there are some tournaments. My mate Reese, who is currently running the Queensland League, he runs an event called the 11th, which is end of the Queensland season. It's our, like, goodbye event, essentially. Finale. You don't get any points for it. It's for shits and gigs.
Right.
That, your placing in that is solely based off soft scores.
Interesting.
Favorite game, favorite player, like how your army's painted, displayed, like it's all based off that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a bit of a shits and giggles event.
Yeah.
The Queensland GT, for example, is essentially what I mentioned to you before, those 4 things. Is your list on time? Is your army based? Does it have 3 colors? And have you gone above and beyond?
So can you turn up to one of those events then without your army being painted or based? Still play, but you just won't get those additional...
You won't get those additional scores. And you can do very, very well at the tournament. You can still potentially win the tournament if you don't have that stuff.
But you're handicapped, I guess.
But you're handicapped. And that's essentially what it turns out to be. So Clash, which is the one where I didn't bring a display board, they dive a little bit heavier into the soft score stuff as well. There's display board, there's like a written theme, there's all this other stuff, which I would have done, but I had no intention of doing well at Clash.
So you just thought...
I went to Clash with the mindset of, I'm driving 9 hours, I'm going to be tired, fuck it. I won't bring a display board. I won't write up anything. So that's why I didn't do it. And ultimately, each tournament is different. So you need to read the players pack. Now, if you don't want to go to that event because you don't like that soft scores could affect the table, then you don't go to the event if you don't want to.
But it seems like those are few and far between in Australia.
No, there's a fair few where
that's not okay.
Yeah, well, like for the most part, the way that they're set up is that everyone's going to score them.
Yeah.
You show up to the event with like
painted, based.
Painted, based. If you do a wash on your army, that's above and beyond. Like,
right. Okay.
For the most part,
So
turning up to an event with a painted army, you will get all your soft scores.
Gotcha.
It's in a sense a little bit gatekeeping. Yes. We don't want to see grey models, and that's come from going to events where we've seen 40k being played in the room next to us, and half the armies are grey or just primed black. Yeah, and you just go, that's not what we're about.
Is another soft score? Sorry, is things like most sporting? Is that something that
for the most part at most tournaments? No, that there doesn't affect your overall tournament scores. At Clash, I believe it did.
It is.
But I think it was just a general over, like it wasn't you won best sport, so that's going to give you all these extra points. It was, did someone call you a dickhead? No, cool, you'll get 5 tournament points. Again, for the most part, everyone's getting them.
Yeah. Okay.
It's so I guess only those extreme outliers. It's to try and prevent people from being dickheads.
Which is fair, I guess. Yeah, it's I just guess that Clash being such a big event over there to have obviously if you don't bring a display board in your case, or if you were to maybe, let's say you're having a tense game and on a top table or something, and there's a rules query or something, and your opponent potentially thinks that you've behaved in a way that isn't very sporting or something, there is a scenario where potentially that player doesn't get those sporting points or whatever, and if they didn't bring a display board or something as well, and they're, say, a top player, for example, that could impact the outcome of the event in quite a key way. And I guess something like that could happen in
it definitely has happened, and it's happened to myself and Liam. Liam won all 5 games. I won 4 games and only lost to him. But because he didn't bring a display board, or he didn't have a quote-unquote above and beyond, or maybe at that tournament, or it was specifically display boards, I ended up winning the tournament.
Oh, even though he went 5-1.
He went 5-1. So there are scenarios where that does happen, but ultimately, again, it's that thing of you read the players pack, you know what you're walking into. They're not very hard to achieve. Your display board, and I've seen this, and this is one of my favorite stories. Your display board could be fucking anything. I've seen a dude go, I need a display board, run over to the local grocery store called Coles, grabbed a head of lettuce, cracked that open, and then put his elves in it, and said, that's my display.
Just take the elves and just...
Best part of that is he won best army because everyone voted for him as a joke.
It is a lettuce. I mean,
yeah. So like, all of these soft score things are not difficult to achieve.
They're not. Gotcha.
90% of the time, just showing up to the tournament
should be good.
You will get those soft scores. There are some that push a little bit further, like Clash. But Clash, from my understanding, Clash has been running for God knows how long. It's been running for a long, long time. And it started off as a small little tournament, maybe like 10 players or some shit.
Yeah.
They used to wear suits at Clash because it was we're wargaming in suits. And then it's just slowly grown. And so I guess it started off as that like themey, narrative-y, hobby related kind of thing, and it's just grown into the biggest and most prestigious event in Australia. But it still kept its core values of
as it goes.
This, and this. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the GBHL used to, not that it has lost that completely, but kind of in its earlier days when it was more kind of grassroots and it was a smaller community and everything, there was much more of that sort of at events, because it was the same kind of group of players that were going, I think, more for the theme and things. Obviously there was a competitive aspect, and some really, really good players that played back then still play now and are obviously really, really good at the game. But it was, kind of more of the community was just, building and evolving, where now, not that obviously that isn't happening now, the league, I think from 2022 to 2023 doubled in size. So it's growing at a massive rate. Yeah. It's just now, as it is really, really large, you have kind of two ends of the spectrum. I think you've got the players that want to go to 80s and kind of have more of it be focused around the theme of the game and all that sort of thing. But then you've got a big and ever-growing community of players that want to be as competitive as they sort of can and do well at these events, and try perform. So, and it seems like that is the case in Australia as well. There's still players that want to go and do really, really well at these tournaments. It's just the approach is slightly different between the two communities.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And myself as a competitive player, as I mentioned before with Clash, I went to Clash with no intention of doing well. So there's some tournaments that I, in my mind, I go, I'm going to be competitive. I'm going to do well at this event. This is my goal. But then there's other ones where I just, cool. This is the most competitive tournament in Australia, but fuck it. Let's just, I'm going for the social aspect. I think ultimately, as an umbrella, as much as we are competitive and have those competitive players, it is a social thing.
Of course.
That's, we love a good Saturday night piss up in between a 2-day event. One of the great stories is a tournament up in Queensland, 1,000 points. Myself, Liam, Jacob from Conquest Creations, and another fella, Dylan. We were in the top 4.
Right.
I think at that point I was coming second. I think Jacob was coming first, Liam third, and Dylan fourth. We were the last ones to leave the pub. And the next day, we all dropped out of the top 4, except Jacob, who stayed fourth. And it's stories like that you love. We love retelling that. We love just getting absolutely sloshed.
Yeah, I mean, it was only at a GBHL 100 a few weeks ago that I dropped out of day 2 because I think my drink might have been spiked
exciting.
in the club, or if not, I just got way too drunk and I was throwing up the following day, like well into the evening, just all day, just on my own, just throwing up. So we do love it out as well. So.
Yeah, no, of course. Like the drinking culture over there is, very similar to over here. Then there's another good one of a tournament up in Gladstone, which is a 6+ hour drive north of Queensland. Myself and this fella, Jeff, if you've heard of the channel WAG, Jeff's the guy. Yeah, I miss them, sadly.
WAG inspired us to actually start doing our back reps the way that they sort of film them, certain aspects that I took heavy inspiration from. So
no, they are phenomenal, and I miss them dearly. Sadly, it doesn't seem like they're playing that much anymore. But this story is me and Jeff, again, Saturday night at WAG tournaments. You just get hammered. Everyone would stay out as late as possible and all get hammered.
Yeah.
Me and Jeff were on top table. We show up to the table, day 2. We put our armies down and we both sit there just... just, I've got to go to the toilet, Jeff. I'll be back. And then you come back and just like, oh, it's my turn now.
Yeah. Shit.
We love shit like that. It's always good fun.
Yeah, there is a huge social aspect obviously over here as well, and like I say, as it's the same group of like top players and things that are going to all these GBHL 100s, and you know you see each other so frequently, so you know there is a huge group of people that often meet up on Saturday nights and things. Obviously you're seeing them so regularly at tournaments anyway. There is obviously a huge social aspect, and obviously that lives very much so in 80s and 90s as well, but there are, say, lots of top players that they don't always stay out because they're 3-0 and they have to win this GBHL 100 and get the 100 points.
See, the good old like classic Aussie just saying of like so someone's gone 3-0 day one, they're on you know 36 VPs. They're
loving it.
If they don't go out, they're a coward. There's no they've lost. Everyone's lost all respect for them.
Everyone's disappointed.
Absolutely.
The lack of spirit.
Yeah, exactly. If you're 3-0 after day one, you're the one that should be drinking the most. Absolutely. There's another great story about a dude over in New Zealand. I can't remember when this was, but this would have been pre-COVID, I believe. He's 3-0 after day one of the big New Zealand tournament, goes out drinking with everyone. Everyone leaves. He goes out to a club. He leaves the club when the club closes in the morning, walks back to the venue, plays his last 2 or 3 games,
straight to the venue.
wins them all, falls asleep during the announcement of the awards, and he's won the event.
He just wakes up with a trophy, and he's just like...
And there's a video that was going around of him in this club dancing on his own. It's like...
He won the event!
Just, let's go! I've got a tournament tomorrow.
Love it.
We might start wrapping it up. This has been a phenomenal chat.
It has been. No, I've learned a lot. And I hope the listeners, you know, wherever you are in the world, you know, if you're in Australia and you're maybe not too sure about how things are in the UK, obviously it's kind of like the birth of Warhammer and things, right? Like
absolutely,
in the UK and everything. So like,
Nottingham. So
we do have the you know, biggest league. So if you're kind of like unsure on how things were in the GBHL, and obviously I think there's lots of British listeners who aren't too sure on just the structure and how everything is in Australia. They sort of know that you guys maybe take some wackier lists, but that's about it. So I think we've covered a lot.
We definitely have. Have. And look, as much as I've spoken a lot of shit about GBHL over the years, I've learned a lot. But I'm still going to talk a lot of shit about GBHL. That's not going to slow down.
John Smith called him waves.
Keep your eyes out for old man John Smith.
He's a tyrant.
But no, look, it's been a good learning day. Learned a lot. And mad respect for what you guys are doing over there. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, things are going really well. And I mean, the team kind of, you know, so we came third last year, and we had some new recruits this year as well that have come in, some really, really good players. So we're aiming for at least second. You know, we've got to improve from last year. And we document everything to do with that over on the Golems Gamers channel. So everything to do with the tournament scene in the UK, you know, when FAQs are released, news and things, although we don't always get to the news first. We try to get there, but
we'll see who gets there first on the next one.
Depends if I'm at work or not, but if I'm not at work, you best believe it's a throwdown. But if you're not familiar, we do lots of bat reps and things as well. So check out the Golems Gamers channel, baby.
Absolutely, go check them out. Lovely group of lads.
Love it.
But thanks for popping on. And
thanks for having me.
Essentially, you did most of the interviewing, which was nice.
I would be lying if I said I didn't come into it with, you know, wanting to try and, you know, get your take on things, you know?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. No, I'm absolutely there for it. But go check out Eliott and the rest of the crew over at Golem's Gamers and
Peace.
chuck up some support for them. Until next time, bye, I guess.
Goodbye.